Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Srini here, and today we're going to look at the part 3 in the Playwright with TypeScript series. So, we have already seen in the last session that how do we get started with Playwright by downloading and installing Playwright. So, today we are going to go a step further and understand how do we write the test cases file in the spec.js file, what exactly it is, and how do we write the test cases, what is the syntax for the same. We are going to understand that. So I'm just going to show with an example, as well as I'm going to also show you all what to check if the prerequisites are installed correctly or not for Playwright. So we saw that we have installed node.js in the last session, as well as we have also installed the Visual Studio Code, the IDE for the Playwright. Now it's not the IDE for Playwright ideally, it's just the IDE for JavaScript and TypeScript. We prefer to use Visual Studio Code, like how we prefer for Java, Eclipse IDE. Likewise, for JavaScript and TypeScript, Visual Studio Code is the ideal IDE to be used, right? Now, how do we check if the node and other things whichever are installed are working and everything is set? So for that, you have to go to your environment variables. So go to your environment variables. So you can go to your environment variables and just do the setting for that. Go to environment variables, and you can see here for my environment variables here, I'll go to path, I'll click on edit. So you need to go to either environment system variables or user variables, wherever you might have set the path for your node.js. So if you can see for my case, I have set the node.js path in the system variables. So it is present it in the program files node.js folder. Likewise, even I've installed JDK21 for Amazon Corito. That is the Java version I'm using. In case you're using Java, then you need to set the path for Java. So depending upon whichever language you're using, you need to set the path for its development kit environment. Similarly for Python as well. But for now, I'm just mentioning you all the prerequisites for Playwright. So Node.js should be installed here. And not only that, after that is done, you can come to your command prompt. And like this, you can check your version. You can just do node hyphen hyphen version, and it will give you the version installed in your local. Same for the npm. Now node is actually like a runtime environment which you require for your JavaScript execution and TypeScript execution. So it's something similar to like your Java runtime environment. You need a JDK and a JRE, right? When you are executing something within Java. So likewise for JavaScript or TypeScript kind of programming languages, we need to have a node.js installed. And this node provides a runtime environment where you can have all your tests getting executed, and it will also have certain configuration files and configuration variables, etc. to be used. Similarly, there is one more variable called npm. This actually is nothing but like a package installer. Now, you might have already worked with Maven. It's like a build tool where we try to install some dependencies or basically like softwares from the internet, right? So npm serves a similar purpose. It's like a package installer within your project. It will install some packages based on whatever you have asked it to be installed. So I'll explain about that when we just go through in today's session the entire structure of the project, and we will also look at only the spec.js file. So these two things we need to check. Okay, now let's come back to our Visual Studio Code. Now we have two files present over here. So let's look at the overall structure of the project. We have something called node underscore module. Okay, and this is basically having all those dependencies which we required in our project. So we would require Playwright, we would require Playwright core. If you are executing or working with TypeScript, we also need dependencies for TypeScript. So we'll come to that. How do we install a new dependency and where these dependencies are getting installed from? So think of this way that this node underscore modules represents like your reference libraries in your Java Maven project. So whoever have worked with Maven, they would understand. In case you have not worked with Maven, you can watch my videos on my Selenium with Java automation playlist. There I have created videos using Maven project, and how a Maven project looks like you can understand from that video, and then come back to this one. But in case if you're familiar, let's go ahead. So the node underscore module represents something similar to like a reference libraries inside a Maven project, where you would be having all your different libraries present inside this particular folder. The test folder would represent all your test cases which are present inside your project, right? So we have got a file called example.spec.js. So this is by default created by Playwright for us whenever we started working on this project. That time when we did the npm init, right? That time this particular project structure got created on its own. So this, always you need to remember one thing, that any test case file in Playwright would always end with a suffix .spec.js. This has to be your suffix if you're working with JavaScript. If you're working with TypeScript, it has to be .spec.ts, where ts represents TypeScript. This test examples you can for now ignore, and I can delete it as well. It's not required. It's just like a sample one created by Playwright for us. This is not required. Then you have something called .git ignore in case you are working with pushing your project into Git repo, right? That time you can basically mention as to which all files you can ignore to be pushed onto the Git repo. So those you can configure in your .git ignore. Then you are having package -log.json. Basically, this particular file gets created whenever you are creating a package.json. That time this file also gets created. And since we have used the npm command, this package.json is in line with the npm command. Whatever dependencies we have installed, those have come from the npm command. You can see here registry.npmjs.org. So this is like a public npm registry we are used here. And the most important one we have is package.json. So package.json would be mentioning as to, we can mention here as to which dependencies we want to install. So example here we have mentioned, okay, install me the dependencies for Playwright test and types node, means for the node dependency. Likewise, we can also mention a comma separated here for TypeScript. So then it will install that TypeScript version, whichever you have mentioned here. Now there is one interesting notation present over here, this up arrow symbol. So this represents that install this version, but keep checking for updates in future. If this version has any higher version beyond it, let's say 1.56 or some other version has come beyond this existing version, then do install that on its own. So without me requiring to come to package.json and changing the version, it will automatically get the latest one on its own because we have mentioned this symbol. So this is very important thing to keep in your project, and it will be very useful as well in across all the industry projects. We are using this kind of a process to follow this one. Okay. And the other one is that we have got a file called playwright.config.js, which we would be definitely seeing in detail in our next session. But just on a high level, you can see what exactly we are doing here. We are importing certain configurations from our Playwright library, and we are creating one configuration over here. And in that configuration, just on a high level, I wanted to mention that we are mentioning a directory which will be referencing that within our project which particular test cases we want to execute. So we have mentioned the path dot means inside the current project, Playwright YT. Just go inside that and which particular folder, test folder. Okay, so we will look at the other variables in our next session. So we'll go back now to our example.spec.js. Now, for time being, just forget about what is written over here. I don't want to make you all confused or make it a little complicated. Let's start from very scratch. Okay. Let's start from the syntax part, like how do we write a function in JavaScript. So for those of you all who may know JavaScript already, it will be like a known thing for you. But in case those who are new to JavaScript, I just want it to be like a refresher. So what we do a function here in JavaScript is that we write here test. Okay, just wanted to give you all an idea of Playwright. How do we write a test method in Playwright, as well as at the same time I'm also explaining the JavaScript syntax. So if you can see here, we have exported this from test uh, annotation from Playwright library. So this is of course a Playwright annotation method, and just look at the syntax here. It says that you need to have a title followed by a body. Okay, so let's give a title for our Playwright test method. So let's say first test case. I'm just going to keep it very simple. I don't want to make it complicated at all. This is the first parameter, followed by we need to have a body. Now, here we actually have to provide a function, a JavaScript function, because this is a JavaScript file, right? So we need to provide a JavaScript function which will serve a purpose of executing this test case. So in JavaScript, it's an asynchronous language. So whatever we write in JavaScript, everything will happen asynchronously. The calls would happen asynchronously. What I mean by asynchronously is that it's not going to happen like, okay, sequentially, one by one, our test steps are going to get executed. How we normally see in a synchronous behavior, like you might have worked with Selenium, it happens step by step execution, right? So in JavaScript, it will not be happening that way. So you have to always make sure that you mention async keyword over here. It's like a prefix which is have to be mentioned. Then you need to provide a function keyword. Now, function keyword, if you see here, normally in JavaScript, right, we need to mention a function followed by a function name. Like here, there would have been a function name. But for now, I am just going to go ahead and tell that I don't need to give any function name. I just want to have it like an anonymous function or something like it doesn't need to have any name. I don't want to give it any name. But just that I would know it's a function because I have mentioned the parenthesis over here. Okay, I can provide some parameters right now. Okay, but I'm just going to keep it simple for now. Okay, and then what you're going to do is you're going to open a curly brace and close a curly brace because it's a function, right? Like how we have seen in our Java or Python or other syntax. In Python, of course, we don't have curly braces, but we would be having a scope of a function, right? What is the start, what is the end, with usage of indentations. But in case of Java and in case of JavaScript, we need to use curly braces over here to define the scope of the function, right? So this is like an anonymous function which is having a parenthesis which is not having any parameters right now, but we can have a parameter, of course, and we have a scope defined. And at the end, you have the parenthesis close for your test method. This is the structure of a test method in our Playwright. Okay. But since you have mentioned async over here, I have to ensure that all my steps, they do execution. For example, if I want to do login, then I want to, let's say, go to home page. And then let's say I want to do some assertions. Assertions means I want to check that this thing exists or that value is equal to something which I did expect it to be, right? So when I do this way, these steps would be executing in parallel. But can I have assertions or home page steps executed before login? That would mean that without the user even being logged in, they are trying to do some actions inside the home page or do some assertions, right? Which is not going to be working. So what you have to do is you have to mention a async word. So when you mention async word for your function, you need to also mention for individual steps, like example, await, then mention step one. Means whatever you want to do in step one, you can do. Then await again, then again, await again. So this is the norm we need to follow whenever we are working with JavaScript. We have to get used to this async at the method level and await at the step level. So that way, we are telling to JavaScript that and its runtime environment of node.js that execute this step first, then you go to the second step. So that way, we are telling it to wait until the step is done, don't go to the next step. So that is a simple thing which we need to keep in our mind. Okay, this is the first way we can work with a JavaScript. The another way we can also do a method definition is that we can still have this method, but instead of having, we can also use a arrow method symbol. Okay, so I have to give a new name here. So let's say test case one. Okay, and I'm going to have a async function over here. Let's just for now comment out these things. Okay, so we would be basically having a way of writing this way. We would not require a function word as such here. Like this is one way of doing representation of a function where you are mentioning the function keyword and using an anonymous function. This is the another way of representation. So this is called arrow functions in JavaScript. So these are JavaScript syntax basically, but I'm just explaining in terms of the context of Playwright. And this is an anonymous function using function keyword. So these things we need to keep in our mind. Okay. And again, we have to follow the similar things that whenever we are using async at the method level, we need to also have await at the step level. Now let's do a very simple test here. So for now, I'm just going to execute one test case and just show it to you as to how to go ahead and execute this test case. So for now, I'm just going to keep a very simple syntactical part. I just want to make you all get started on Playwright, even in the first session when we are looking at the spec.js file. So what we are going to do is that we are just going to introduce one particular fixture that is called a browser fixture. So there is a fixture called browser fixture in Playwright. So this browser fixture is something like you might have used driver variable in WebDriver perspective, right? In case of Selenium. So it's something similar to that, but not exactly the same. So here browser fixture means that you have to first launch a browser. Okay, you have to launch a browser, and for that you need to have certain variable used. So whenever you're using a variable within this curly braces means you're telling to Playwright it's a Playwright variable. So remember, if you don't mention curly brace, it will not be considered like a Playwright variable. So this we are telling to Playwright it's a Playwright variable. So let's go ahead and try to use it. So we have to say browser dot new context. So context means we're trying to launch a browser, okay, a blank browser for the first time. So this is how you need to do it, okay, and we are going to store it into one variable. So in JavaScript, we can declare variables either using let keyword. So example, I'll just show you let context equal to, because it's a new context we are creating, or you can also create a variable using const. So these are the two ways. You can also use where as well. So if you want to deep dive into these different syntactical terminologies with respect to JavaScript, please do refer my JavaScript playlist in my YouTube channel, and that will really clarify all your concepts on JavaScript. So I'll be creating more videos on the JavaScript continuation as well. But for now, already I've got videos explaining what are the differences between let, constant, where, etc., and when to use what. So for now, let me show you the usage of all the three. So I'll just go for now one more variable, and I'm just going to use this context now, and I'm going to say new. Okay, let's say context one for now. Context one. Okay, so we have another particular method called new page. Okay, so I'm going to tell about this await thing also. For now, let's skip it. Does not exist. Okay, so let's look at it. Yeah, so it's basically asking us to use await. So let's do one thing. For now, let me mention await for both of them, and I'll explain you what is this await. Why are we using await here? Definitely, I'll let you all know when to use await and when not to use await. So for now, I'm just going to store it into a constant variable. Let's call it as a page object one. Okay. So I have created two variables right now. So where we will use sometime later. For now, I've used two variables. I've started from a browser fixture. It's like a browser instance shared between all your tests in the same worker. The worker means like a thread in JavaScript terminology. You might be aware of JavaScript terminology. In that sense, it's like a thread. We want this worker to execute in one thread. If in case only one thread wants to do enter your entire execution, so you can do it this way. Now, if you look at this new context, what it is giving to you as the return type, it is giving you a promise of browser context. So a promise is something like in JavaScript terminology, promise is something like it will be expected to be given as an output. So if you are having any time a promise as a return type, you need to mention one thing for sure. You need to give await here. Means you want to tell your JavaScript runtime environment of Node.js, do not go to the next step. That is line number 7. You wait until this promise is fulfilled. That is the meaning of using this promise as a return type and using await. So that is the way we need to follow in JavaScript terminology. Now that we have created a page, what is a page? Page is like a new tab within your browser. So let's say I am just opening a Chrome browser for now, right? I'm just saying google.com, right? So this is a browser. In that we are having one tab. Okay. So that is what we are having here, a tab. That is a page. Now using this page is like you can think of it like a driver now. And now you can start working with your browser. So I can say go to. So we used to have get method in Selenium. Now here we have got the goto method. So here I can just say google.co.in. Okay. And can just have it this particular method, this particular website being invoked. Now just go to again, what it is returning? Promise, right? Whenever it is returning promise, what is the thing we need to keep in mind? To use await. In case you don't use await, it is not going to give you any kind of a warning or a syntactical or a compilation issue. We would be getting that issue at runtime. So that is how, if someone is new to Playwright, they will understand what they have made a mistake. So you have to always ensure async await is used. There are certain scenarios where await is not required, as I mentioned, whenever there is no promise as such as a return type of that invoke method, then you don't have to use await. For example, if you create a locator, you may not require to use await because there is no action being performed. Okay. And let's say after this, we want to just get the title. So I can have a method called title, and that is it. And if you again hover over the title method, it is returning a promise of type string. So in JavaScript, if you want to print something, we have something called console.log. Like how do we have system.out.println or some other syntax in other languages? Just we can have the syntax followed of console.log, and that is it. So we have created our first function in Playwright using JavaScript language. Now this is the coding part. Now how do you basically get started with the execution part? So for that, you need to mention npx playwright test. This is the syntax we need to use in order to run our Playwright test. And by default, I want to tell you about one thing here is that if you see here, there is an attribute called headless. So in case if you don't know, so as of now, if you can see in the configuration file, if I search for it, right, there is no headless attribute. And now let's try to run the test and see whether we are able to see the browser or not. Okay, I got it. So for now, it is running 12 tests using two workers. Okay. And you are not able to see those test execution happening. See, there is no browser being launched over here. And I'll tell you all why there is 12 tests here, right? And why we are having two workers, because we are having two threads defined. Okay. So that is the reason that you can see that two workers are doing the job, and now all the 12 test cases are being executed at 12 of 12. And you can see 12 of 12 test cases have been passed, but you did not see the execution happening, right? Because it was in a headless mode. Because by default, Playwright execution happens in a headless mode. And the reason you see the 12 test cases being executed over here is because apart from our test, this was one more test as well, our test, apart from these two, there were 10 test cases which are present below. And because of that, it has executed in a parallel fashion. So what we can do for simplicity, we can remove the entire other things, whatever we had. Okay. And we will just keep it simple for now, only one spec file, which is having only one test case. And now we want to make one small change. Instead of it to be in headless mode, I want it to be running in a headed mode. That is, I want to see the browser. So I can mention double hyphen headed, and I can run the test. Okay, it's three tests. Maybe somewhere I have to spot out. Then maybe some three tests present. This is the first test, and you can see here that it has again launched the browser because we have got three browsers. Yes, we have got three different browsers. That is why we can see three tests. So that is the reason. If you see here, we have Chromium, we have Firefox, and we have WebKit. So it has did the execution for one test case across three browsers. Now, how was this possible? Because of your playwright.config.js. So if you scroll down a bit, and it is using two workers because you've defined two over here. So that is why there are two workers, and it is mentioned here as fully parallel to be true. So don't worry about these for now because I'll be showing up in the next session for sure in detail. So come below and you can see here projects Chromium, Firefox, and WebKit. So if you mention here comma separated 3, means it will execute in all these three individual browser. If you had commented out or removed these other two, it would have executed only in Chromium browser. So this is how the execution happened. And if you can see here, all the tests have been launched, right? And they also got auto destroyed. They also got destroyed. So this is my tab, which I had opened. Okay. So the test after execution, they automatically close the browser. Unlike in Selenium, we had to manually do driver.close or driver.quit. But here it will be automatically getting closed. Now, if you see here, it is giving us a suggestion that if you want to open the last HTML report, you can copy this command and run it. So let's do this so that I can show you how a Playwright report looks like. And you can see here, this is the beautiful HTML report which we are getting. And it also gives you an indication of how many got passed, failed, how much time it took overall for every test case. And if you want to look at what exactly this test case is executing on, see here, this is a label Chromium, Firefox, WebKit. And if you click on it, you can see that individual steps are also being mentioned. And if I expand it, it is telling you, pointing as to what exactly is happening. And if the entire step is getting passed, it will be a green tick here. If it is failed, there will be a small cross symbol in red color. So for us, all the test steps were executing successfully. That is why everything is a green tick over here. And if you look at the std out or the console.log, we had only one statement, which was printing the title, and the title is Google. So this is the way how a sample Playwright report looks like. So we'll go deep dive into this in our next session. So stay tuned for that. And if you are new to my channel, please do not forget to subscribe to it and hit the thumbs up for the video and do share with your friends. Thank you so much.